Interesting events in British history, from the 1933 card set included in boxes of Typhoo tea. Number 1, Roman Britain. The Romans under Julius Caesar attempted an invasion of Britain in 55 and 54 BC as part of their policy of expansion northward, but colonization was not begun until the Emperor Claudius occupied the Thames estuary and captured Colchester in AD 43. A network of excellent roads marked steady progress during the next half-century. In AD 122 the Emperor Hadrian built a wall from Tyne to the Solway to check incursions from the north. Number 2, the coming of Christianity. Bede sets down the tradition that Pope Gregory, seeing a group of Saxons in the Roman slave market and being told they were Angles, remarked that they had the faces of angels and were deserving of Christian teaching. Several years later he sent a mission under Saint Augustine, who in 597 landed in the Kentish kingdom of Ethelbert, where his preaching converted first the court, and finally turned the whole kingdom to Christianity. Number 3, the rise of Northumbria. Under Edwin, reigning 617 to 633, the kingdom of Northumbria had risen to the first importance in the north. On seeking the hand of the King of Kent's sister, Edwin agreed that his bride might retain her Christian religion, and among the retinue that came north was Bishop Paulinus, who took advantage of Edwin's conquest to spread Christianity in northern England and Wales. In 664 the Synod of Whitby settled many of the differences between the Celtic and Roman churches. Number 4, the West Saxon Kingdom. During the 8th century the Kingdom of Mercia occupied a foremost place in England, but subsequently civil wars in that kingdom coincided with the rise of King Egbert. In 825 the kings of Mercia and Wessex met in battle, when it was said the Brook of Ellendun ran red. Egbert was victorious and made Wessex the nucleus of a unified England. Number 5, English sea power begins. Alfred the Great became King of Wessex in 871 and had at once to defend his kingdom against the Danes. Believing that the best way to forestall invasion was to meet the enemy at sea, he began building a navy, and in 875 won a sea battle against the Vikings. He died in 900, but the work of defense was done and the future of the English nation assured. Number 6, struggles with the Danes. Athelstan carried on Alfred's campaign against the Danes and pushed his conquests into Northumbria and Scotland. In 937 a league of Picts, Scots, Welsh and Danes was formed to check the spread of English domination. A legend states that the forces of the league under Anlaf sailed into the mouth of the Humber. The Confederates were defeated by Athelstan at the Battle of Brunanburh. Number 7, the Normans in England. The independence of Saxon England ended in 1066 when Harold was defeated and slain at Hastings by William of Normandy. By 1070 the conquest was complete and William I began consolidating his gains. In 1086 his commissioners in all parts of the country compiled the Domesday Survey to enable the king to levy taxes uniformly and to centralize the government of the country. Number 8, England in the Crusades. Under Richard I England first took part in the crusading movement. In the Third Crusade Richard joined with other Christian princes in attacking the Saracen king Saladin at Acre for the recovery of Jerusalem. Although the military gains were not lasting, Richard won glory as the greatest of knights-errant, while England gained much from contact with the trade, art and knowledge of the East. Number 9, Magna Charta. Misuse of royal power, extravagance, and a quarrel with the Pope roused against King John the hatred of his people. With the support of Archbishop Langton the barons met at Runnymede and compelled the king to subscribe to Magna Charta, the Great Charter. Intended as a practical remedy for temporary evils, this document became the basis of constitutional liberty in England. Number 10, the 100 Years' War. Under Edward III England embarked upon the 100 Years' War with France. This was perhaps the first European war that can be called national. Upon the success of the naval battle of Sluys in 1340, Edward III based his claim as Lord of the English Sea. Number 11, Caxton and the English language. Out of the chaos of the Wars of the Roses came the greatest English event of the century. About 1470 William Caxton, a Flemish printer, set up the first English press at Westminster under the patronage of Edward IV. His editions of Chaucer, and his translations, did more than provide Englishmen with books, they formed a standard of English for all who could read. Number 12, a strong personal monarchy. It is perhaps natural that Henry VIII, one of the most autocratic of all English monarchs, should have had as his minister a man of such strong character and ability as Cardinal Wolsey. The magnificent state which Wolsey kept at Hampton Court dazzled his contemporaries, and contributed not a little to his final disgrace. The palace has occasionally been a royal residence. Number 13, the Spanish Armada. The exploits of Drake, Hawkins, Frobisher and other mariners of Queen Elizabeth's reign were regarded by the Spaniards as a challenge to their supremacy overseas. In 1588 they sent a great fleet to England, intending to destroy the navy and invade the country. This was utterly defeated by the English fleet under Lord Howard of Effingham, a victory which established England's naval power and laid the foundation of her colonial empire. Number 14, struggles between King and Parliament. The struggle for constitutional freedom reached a crisis in the reign of Charles I, embittered now by religious differences. In 1642 Charles raised the royal standard at Nottingham, the first act in a war which led to the king's execution in 1649 and the establishment of a Commonwealth with Oliver Cromwell as Lord Protector. Number 15, the Plague, the Fire, and the Dutch. Within 7 years of the Restoration 3 catastrophes threatened again to rouse public feeling against the king, Charles II. In 1665 the plague in London swept away about 100,000 souls. In 1666 more than two-thirds of London was destroyed by fire, including Old St. Paul's, which was rebuilt by Sir Christopher Wren. In 1667 a Dutch fleet entered the Thames, destroyed ships and bombarded Chatham. Number 16, Protestant Succession established. James II supported Roman Catholicism at a moment when public feeling was very strong against it. In May 1688 7 Anglican bishops, headed by Archbishop Sancroft, protested against the king's order to read from church pulpits the Declaration of Indulgence to dissenters. They were tried by the king's order, but acquitted. That night an invitation was sent to the Protestant, William of Orange, to become King of England. Number 17, the War of the Spanish Succession. In 1702 England entered upon what became the First World War. John Churchill, Duke of Marlborough, took command of land operations when Queen Anne ascended the throne, and by a series of victories proved himself a military genius. The Battle of Ramillies was his greatest strategic success. England gained an assured position in world affairs, and a wider commercial outlook. Number 18, the South Sea Bubble. The Treaty of Utrecht raised great hopes in England of increased trade. Manipulators took advantage of this to push the interests of the South Sea Company, formed in 1711 to exploit the resources of Spanish America. A mania of speculation swept over all classes, even the public finances were involved to a disastrous extent by the government of George I. In 1720 the company's affairs burst like a bubble. Number 19, the birth of British India. During the reign of George II and the Ministry of Chatham, a great empire was founded in the East. While the government was planning to attack and acquire Canada from France, Clive, on behalf of the East India Company, had won the Battle of Plassey, and was extending his conquests to all Bengal. This prevented further French intervention, and the company was free to develop India according to British ideals. Number 20, the American Revolution. Differences of temperament and ideals were more surely the cause of the American Revolution than incidents like the Boston Tea Party, when chests of tea were seized by disguised men and thrown overboard as a protest against taxation. The secession of the American colonies which followed in 1783 was the price of experience in governing the new empire. Number 21, the Wars against Napoleon. A century of rivalry and warfare between France and England culminated in the Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars. In 1815 the English forces under Wellington won a decisive victory against Napoleon at Waterloo. Since that day England has marched, not against, but in company with her French neighbour. George IV, who acted as regent since 1811, resigned 1830. Number 22, the Reform Bill. The struggle for constitutional freedom had become by 1832 a conflict between classes. The peers' refusal to pass the first Reform Bill, providing limited suffrage for the middle class, caused serious riots in Bristol. Fearful lest the working class might begin a revolutionary movement, the middle and governing classes compromised on their differences, and in May 1832 the bill passed. Number 23, Exploration of Africa. Due largely to the personal influence of Queen Victoria, colonial expansion was often linked with missionary enterprise. David Livingstone's principal object in Africa was the preaching of Christianity, but he was anxious also to discover a route through Africa from north to south. In 1867 he thought his ambition realized on discovering the upper reaches of the Congo, believing he had come upon the source of the Nile. Number 24, Man Master's Air. Aviation has already become a determining factor in the life of the modern world. Serious experimental work was begun in the USA by the Wright brothers in 1900. 9 years later a Frenchman, Louis Blériot, flew a plane across the Channel from Calais to Dover. While Britain has thus lost much of her island invulnerability, she has gained closer communication with her worldwide empire. Number 25, the British Commonwealth of Nations. The late 19th century was a period of remarkable progress in India. To keep pace with the increasing ability of the Indians to decide upon their own problems, the home government entered upon a policy of concession to Indian demands. In 1911 the King Emperor, George V, held a great Durbar at Delhi. He was the first ruling sovereign to visit India.